every story kind of starts with a germ. And in the case of Confessions on the 745, it wasn't necessarily that like moment. That wasn't necessarily the germ for the story. It was actually something that I had kicking around in my head for a while. And I don't even know where it came from. It was just a sentence. And it was, "You can't con an honest man." And I thought, I don't know, I can't even remember where I first heard it, but it was just there. And I kind of, it kind of intrigued me. And I thought it has the ring of truth, but, nothing in human psychology is ever quite so simple. So I started doing my research and I came across a book called The Confidence Game by Maria Konnikova. And I kind of did a deep dive into that book, and she really explores the nature of the confidence game, the psychology of the con artists, and the con. And so I came away from that book with a much more layered idea of who is the con artist and who is the victim. And the idea evolved to, you can't con somebody who doesn't want something. And everybody wants something. So everybody's vulnerable to a good con. And so that was really the seed so there's usually that moment, the germ, and then there's the research. And then the best way I can explain it is if it connects with something deeper that's going on for me, bigger questions that I have, then I start to hear a character voice. And even though this story starts with Selena, really it was Pearl who was my first access to the story. So also I'm a huge lifelong Patricia Highsmith fan. I think she is probably one of the best crime writers that ever lived. And it's her book, Strangers on a Train. Most of us think of it as the Alfred Hitchcock film, but it's really a novel. And I love that. And this is something that that idea of that moment, that one isolated moment, is something that I explore a lot in my work. The idea of the liminal space, the space between things, and Under My Skin, it was hypnagogia, like that moment between sleep and wakefulness. In this case, it's like, you find yourself next to a stranger on a train or anything, right? And you're in that, like your plane or your train or whatever it is, and you're not the person you were when you left where you came from, and you're not the person that you are going to be when you get where you're going. And there's just this one moment, and you're with somebody, a stranger usually, and everything in their life and everything in your life brought you to this place. And there's an energy to that. There's some, and we all know it, like you connect with somebody or you're like, oh my God, I've got to put my earphones in. I cannot listen to this person another second. So there's always like something about that moment that is like uncomfortable, either uncomfortably good or uncomfortably bad. It's rarely neutral, rarely. So that was kind of the thing that that was kind of the moment of the idea of the book that was the thing that always fascinated me. The story itself is fascinating. How two sort of separate people have a moment in their life that aligns toward an agenda that they each have. That's not precisely what I wanted to do, but I also like the idea that no matter where a story begins, it started long before. And so all of that was kind of, that's the abridged version. I have to say the Hollows, and you may have noticed it in some of the other books, it is always trying to get into every book. Like it will always have a cameo. Like there's always like somebody or some piece of it in every book. Like it wants to be in every book, but not every book can be about the Hollows. So, there definitely needs to be another one, but I just don't know when. It's interesting because, I've always been a writer. Like I've been a writer since I was a kid, and a lot of times you get that question, like from people who are like, what happens if you run out of ideas? And I'm always a little confused by that question, because I think to myself, well, how could you ever run out of ideas? Like there are as many stories in the world as there are people. It's like you may take a piece from, you may say, if people say, there's only 7 stories or whatever. And it's like, yeah, I mean, you can take a piece of one of those 7 stories. And of course you'll see pieces of those stories in almost everything. But, that's really not what makes the story. It's the character that makes the story. Everything for me is character driven. All plot flows from character. If I'm not in love with the people that I'm writing about, or at least deeply intrigued, then there's no book. there's no novel. Like I cannot be motivated by plot. Like if you were like, if you could come up with the perfect plot, oh, the stakes are so high and here's the twist and blah, 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 blah. But if people are not in love with your characters, then they're not interested in your plot. And I, believe that completely. So for me, there's always something. So, and it's funny that we're talking about Last Girl Ghosted right now, because I just started writing about it yesterday. I just wrote my behind the book essay for Last Girl Ghosted, because, it's really only right now, a year after, turning it in, that I can go, okay, so what is that? What did I write exactly? Like, what is this? What is this book about? And so the germ for that book started I had a conversation with a young friend of mine, and she was like sort of, enmeshed in the whole like online dating thing. And she was like, kind of depressed by like the soullessness of the whole thing. And like how she said that there's just like, there's just like endless choice. She's like, there's an endless pool of people that you could choose from. And then if somebody shows up in your real life and they're not what you imagine them to be from this internet persona, then you can just ghost them. You just walk away from them. There's nothing to tie you to that person ever again. And she would show me like a series of her texts, like that she would have with some guy. I'd be like, oh yeah, I'll be at this bar, and be like, okay, well, I'll be there in 15 minutes. Oh, I'm late. Oh, I can't make it. Oh, maybe, I can't make it. And that maybe next week, like whatever. And then nothing. Right. Like, so it's just this, like, it's like anything related to technology. And again, this is like another theme that runs through a lot of my work. There's no close tie connection. It's all loose tie connections. And so like once the guy's gone, like you probably might never run into that person again. You're certainly not going to be sitting next to his grandma, like in church, the way it used to be when the pool was way smaller, just your town or whatever. So I was really interested in this idea, and that you just go, that you just ghost somebody, that person just goes away and you never hear from them again. And in my research for Confessions, I ran across this thing, the sweetheart scam, which we probably all know what that is, right? You meet somebody online and they, you develop a relationship with that person, and then they have like an accident or something, and they need money wired, and like then they're gone, they disappear as soon as you wire the money, and it happens. I mean, just endlessly. Like even though everybody knows about it, it happens over and over and over again. And so so those were the things that kind of got me thinking about, like, what if you met somebody and you really fell in love with that person and you really thought it was something real? And then you started to reveal yourself, which is what love is, right? You reveal yourself in layers to somebody, and you hope that they don't run into a layer that they can't live with. And so Ren, who's like an advice columnist, and she's been forced into the whole like sort of online dating thing by her best friend Jax. She meets a guy and she falls in love, like hard, even though she didn't want that and she didn't expect that. And after, they've been together for a while, he asks her a question. He says, tell me something that you have never told anybody else. And she does. She shares something about herself that is dark, that is secret, that she has never told anyone. And the next day, he disappears. His social media profiles are deleted. His phone is disconnected. She goes to his apartment, and it's just a vacation rental. He never lived there. And so she's been ghosted. She's revealed herself to this man, and she has been ghosted. And so some people might, just kind of curl up and lick their wounds and just move on, not tell anybody what happened or whatever, but not Ren, because Ren's a fighter and she doesn't like that she's been ghosted. So she starts to follow his very dark digital trail, even when she realizes that this is a very bad man and he has a very strong connection to her dark past. And that is The Last Girl Ghosted. And it does involve the Hollows, and we will have more than just a cameo from Jones Cooper. I did just type the end on my 20th novel. So that was a couple weeks ago, and of course it's just the first draft, which is really like the fifth draft. So it's just the first draft, and so miles to go at this point. But it did feel like kind of a big, it did feel like kind of a big moment to, complete my 20th novel, considering that I never wanted to do anything else. I've been published since I was, my first publishing contract I signed when I was 29. I have been writing, I've been a career professional writer and feel just like kind of beyond blessed to be doing what I love to do. And the writing life, the life of the working published writer, it's not for the faint of heart. I'm just going to say that there's these dizzying highs and, crushing disappointments. And it's all of that. Like it's the full rainbow of kind of experience, especially, if you're at it for a long time. And it turns out that it's the same thing as it was to write and to get published in the first place. It's like just pure tenacity, pure never say die tenacity. And I just feel really grateful, really grateful. And hopefully, it'll be, another keep you up all night, can't stop turning the pages, layered, character driven novel of psychological suspense.